day. Now, disappointment for Celtic last night. Mark Wilson is with us to talk to us again. Mark, you're very welcome back. How are you?
Oh, good. Thank you. Thanks for having me back.
What happened last night, do you think? It wasn't the same quality of performance that we'd seen from Celtic, say, in the first game against Real Madrid. What was it that was letting them down last night, that they weren't able to affect their own game plan in the way that we've kind of come to expect them to?
Well, I think, obviously, when you're going into these games and you're missing big players, as Celtic were last night, particularly two centre-halves, then you start a wee bit on the back foot. Now, that's not to say Stephen Welsh did anything wrong. I thought Jens was a little bit shaky in the opening exchanges, and that led to Leipzig having a few clear-cut chances early on in the game. I did think, however, that Celtic got to grips with the game in the first half, and they actually took it to Leipzig. I thought they played quite well up to a stage, but it was the same old problems again last night for Celtic in the final third, where they created so many chances at that period that they were on top, and they didn't take one of them. And we know, again, at this level, I sound like a bit of a broken record here, but at this level, if you keep missing those chances, teams will punish you if you play so open. And at that time in the game, Celtic were open. They were committing bodies forward, which is great to watch. You know, they commit midfielders and wide players into the box to try and create as many opportunities as possible. And when you do that, of course, you leave yourself wide open at the back. And that's where the counter-attack goal came from. Knocked the stuffing out of Celtic for a wee bit, and they find themselves chasing the game again. I did think they got to grips with it, obviously, and then the second half they came out to start fantastically well, but the game just got away from them again, and Leipzig are a good team. Celtic found it difficult, but again, it's the levels you go up. It's hard to compete at this level if you're not on top of your game.
The style of play, Mark, seems to be the big discussion point coming out of last night's game, and maybe in Europe it doesn't quite work as well as it does in the Scottish Premiership. But does Ange need to have a different plan or a plan B? I know Jurgen Klopp, for example, changed formation during the week in the Champions League as well. Like, as you say, it leaves them open, leaves them vulnerable. On the flip side of that, you know, it creates a lot of chances for Celtic. They didn't just take them last night. But is there a question to be had there over the style of play in Europe, especially?
I think so. I think the manager has to take some of the responsibility for that. Now, look, there's no getting away from the way Celtic play and what Ange Postecoglou's done for the club in terms of transformation, and it's exciting to watch week in, week out. It's exciting to watch the Champions League games. For a neutral, it must be a joy to watch because you know you're getting goals in it. But I feel there's got to be a balance there somewhere. You mentioned yourself there, even Jurgen Klopp has changed his style. You know, the top teams adapt in this competition because they know they're coming up against the elite. They know they will get punished if they go gung-ho and just throw everything at other teams. They know teams are coming up against have got clever players who will exploit you. I just feel Celtic maybe haven't learned their lesson from, you know, last season in the Europa League. Last night was very much like, if you remember back to Betis and Bayer Leverkusen, I was watching the game thinking it's very much like that Celtic could go ahead and score 3 or 4 goals easily. But at the other end, you could easily see Leipzig doing the exact same. That's the way it was last season. Of course, you're stepping up and leveling the competition, which, you know, the dangers then, come around quicker and you often get punished more. And you just wonder, you know, is he going to change? Well, he says he's not for changing, but to have success in this competition, I feel there's got to be an address somewhere, you know, of balance, that you've got to kind of give your defenders the best opportunity to keep a clean sheet.
So, Mark, I think we all agree Ange has obviously got a giant football brain, and there's a strain of madness / genius to him. So he must, maybe he's saying something publicly and thinking something differently. What's his backroom staff saying to him when they're having this conversation? They know that what they did last night didn't work, and they know those other previous examples that you've given from last season. So what are they actually thinking about long-term success in this competition? Why would they continue to do the same thing and expect different results?
It's a very good question. Look, I played with John Kennedy, who's been there as Ange's right-hand man from the start. John, of course, a very good defender in his time. Now, I've no doubt that the backroom staff have bought into what Ange Postecoglou has done, because it's again, it's fantastic. You overwhelm teams, you play at a quick tempo. But at this level, like I keep saying, there has got to be a balance in how you do it. So I've no doubt that John and Gavin Strachan, who, will analyse things and probably give them their idea from a defensive point of view, how things could be more solid in terms of the middle of the pitch. I think that's where the problem is at this level. That the Celtic players vacate the middle of the pitch so often and trying to create chances and trying to get bodies into the box to overwhelm the opposition does work, because we've seen it against Real Madrid, we've seen it Shakhtar, and now against Leipzig. It's just when you're left with that one holding midfielder, and it's a big old pitch against athletic, quick players who quickly go past you, and you're right onto a back four or a back two in some occasions, because Celtic's fullbacks are so high. So, look, they're clever guys, these guys on the backroom team. Ange Postecoglou is a very smart guy, knows football inside out. And last night, in his post-match interviews, he's probably as disappointed as I've ever heard Ange after a game, which maybe tells its story. I think he knows that at both ends it isn't going right, because in these games you can maybe point to one area and say it didn't go well for us in that area of the pitch, and we need to work in that. But for Ange Postecoglou, it isn't just defending, it's the problem. It's in the penalty box he's finding a problem. How often have we said that about Celtic domestically? Well, very little. But he has to find a way in the Champions League of his players at the top end of the pitch, putting one of those chances away. I mean, there was 12 attempts on goal last night from Celtic. An away team in the Champions League, that's good going. And they only take one of them. You put your defence under immense pressure to keep the ball at the net the other side. And
you mentioned the defensive absentees there, Mark Cameron, Carter Vickers being one of them, and like Gordon Strachan after the match was kind of talking about, systems don't win games, it's players that win games. Is that an issue as well, that the defence just was a little bit leaky last night, just more leaky? Like, obviously Leipzig and Celtic both good attacking teams, but Celtic's defence let them down more than the Leipzig defence did. So, is 5 at the back an option for Ange Postecoglou, or do you think he'll change his defensive structure in any way?
No. He's never going to go, in my opinion anyway, to 5 at the back. I could eat those words when it comes round to Leipzig next week, but I just can't see it. I mean, the amount of work he's put into this side with the back four and the inverted fullbacks. You seen it last night. I mean, it's how the second goal, I suppose, against him came about, that Greg Taylor goes into that inside pocket. Joe Hart, I mean, Gordon Strachan, of course, is right. As players that win and lose your matches, Joe Hart doesn't need to play that pass to Greg Taylor. He could go to Jens and everything's, ticking along fine. So I don't think he'll change. I do think the players that are missing for Celtic are big players. I mean, I think you can get away with missing some players or one or two here and there, but it's starting to affect the spine of the team. When you look at Joe Hart making the mistake last night, and looking at the weekend, the goal against Motherwell, I know Juranovic scores his own goal, but I would blame Hart as much as anybody for that. You take out Carter Vickers and Starfelt, there's your first two choice centre halves. Cal McGregor has suffered an injury that Ange Postecoglou says it doesn't look good. Now that's a major concern. And in European competition, your front men through the middle aren't scoring. So this competition heavily relies on the spine of your team, and it's a bit shaky at the minute for Celtic.
Is this all just part of the learning process for the players and the team, and for Ange as well, in that, like, listen to you talk about this, it does sound like from a philosophical perspective they are creating a lot of chances. If they were to increase the performance level by 10 or 15% and a couple of those were to go in, suddenly the game is really different. Like, the psychology of the game is different. Leipzig are under the cosh at home, even though they have a lot of the ball and they're attacking, but they've actually conceded 2 or 3 goals. It's a completely different outcome, or it's certainly a different outcome is on the cards. And we're all talking about this and wow, how brave Celtic were to go to Leipzig and stick to their principles. Is Ange thinking, like, if I have a slightly deeper squad next season and perhaps find a goalkeeper who's more reliable, that the right thing to do is to stick with this, and they'll look back on these as like, okay, that was the learning curve, it was very steep and we got through it? Or is the other side, like, you change things and adapt and you you know, you drag Leipzig into a 0-0 and suddenly you're still in the group, but it doesn't feel as good because, you know, you're going away from what your principles are and what you think you're working on week in, week out on the training pitch.
Yeah, well, I don't think he's ever going to change his principles in that respect. I don't think he's ever going to go anywhere and try and play for a 0-0 draw. I think he's made that quite clear. As soon as he came in, Ange Postecoglou's first press conference, he said he was going to play football that got the fans off their seat, and he's certainly done that. And look, there was question marks going into this campaign in the Champions League, especially when the group was drawn, if he was going to change those principles then. Well, he's shown he's not going to. So you mentioned about the goalkeeper. Look, Joe Hart is a reliable goalkeeper. I think he's been excellent since he's came to Celtic. He will make mistakes, but at this level, those mistakes get punished. I mean, if that's back home in the Premiership, would any player have the ability to play that pass first time and then the finish was very good? I don't know, but I think one thing's for sure is look, the players will get better at this level. Got to remember that this is our first campaign at this level. Some of them, you know, just getting used to Ange Postecoglou's style of play still, so they will get better. If Celtic can qualify again for the Champions League next year, I do believe that there'll be a better outfit. And look, we're chatting like they're done and dusted. Got 2 huge games coming up that they could easily swing this group, and things look a whole lot different in the 2 home games coming up.
Yeah. I can see why he would stick to his principles.
Yeah. Well, he's come this far, I guess, and they're exciting games to watch. Like, I don't really want to lay blame at anyone in particular necessarily, Mark, but as a right back yourself, you probably have a good scope on this. And Juranovic, sometimes last night at right back, you almost feel like he's ball watching at times. Like, is that a concern? Has he been an issue over the last number of games for Celtic? Is it an issue going forward, do you think, or is it just he had a bad game, I guess?
I don't think so. No, listen, I watched last night Juranovic going forward. I thought he was excellent, fun enough going forward. I thought the pace that he shows and the drive that he's got really takes Celtic up the pitch. Defensively, I know he scored an own goal at the weekend, but he also hit the crossbar with an outstanding free kick. Listen, I can't see it with Juranovic. I think he's one of the more steady and reliable performers. So I don't think they've got an issue in that respect. Sometimes think perhaps maybe he could get a hand for his wide guys, but Ange Postecoglou plays his wide guys so high and far up the pitch, it's difficult. I mean, I don't know how much I would have liked that as a fullback if, say, Nakamura stood in the halfway line and allowed me to tackle, you know, Ronaldo or Ronaldinho or whoever else I was playing myself. I'd kind of be thinking, is there any chance you're coming back and help me? So he's got a tough old job. It's a tough gig, by the way, for the Celtic fullbacks. Greg Taylor on the other side, you see him battling away. He's reformed his Celtic career. So, but collectively, it's a disappointment for Celtic last night. There's no doubt about that. But I believe these 2 games coming up, look, if they play with that intensity at Celtic Park that they did in the first half against Real Madrid, I think they will take 3 points against Leipzig, and then it comes down to that game against Shakhtar 2 or 3 weeks later.
It was interesting to listen to Joe Hart after the match as well, Mark, where he fronted up. At least he came out in front of the media after his mistake during the game, but he referenced, you know, it was just a bad pass from him, and he held his hands up on that. And look, Leipzig were pressing with 3 men as well, which made it difficult for him to get that pass right. But he did say, you know, that's the way the manager wants us to play, and you know, Ange wants Joe Hart to play out from the back. So yeah, you know, it does lead to mistakes, but at the end of the day, you can't really blame Ange for an individual mistake.
No, well, look, I listened to those comments as well. Joe was quick to say, you know, I'll front up, it's my fault. But that's the way the manager wants us to play. I did have a wee chuckle at that because, I mean, if it's Cal McGregor trying to make that pass into Greg Taylor, I don't even know if he makes it because it's that tight. So, you know, it's an individual decision on the day. Joe obviously tried to thread the ball through the eye of a needle. I was never on. Got to give credit to Leipzig because when you see the way they front 3 press, they understand that Celtic want to play that way. Like football's went a different way since I actually played it. I can never imagine playing that way. But these players are well drilled in it. You know, they're told that's the way to play. They're given the certain rotations and movements. It's about execution on the night, and mistakes happen. And Joe, unfortunately for Celtic, made a mistake at a crucial time, you know, especially after that goal was ruled out. And I thought Celtic were lucky in that respect. So it probably was just about steadying the ship at that time, you know, seeing out the next couple of minutes. And you probably expect someone with experience of Joe Hart not to make an error like that just at that time. You know, the cameras were still on the Celtic fans actually celebrating the goal being disallowed. And then, you know, as quick as you know it, they're behind and the game's running away from them.
Yeah, definitely you'd want that one back. But it is all obviously then set up for a magical European night under lights next week in Parkhead. Great to have you with us again, Mark. Thanks a million for joining us. Cheers.
Cheers, guys. Thank you.
It's Mark Wilson, former Celtic defender. Obviously, you can hear him on Super Scoreboard on Radio Clyde as well.